other friends. So in the meantime, people who have joined in, they just say hi and hello to each other. I'm Suresh, by the way, for those people who do not know me. I'm essentially a professor at one of the tech universities in India. It's called Dhirubhai Ambani Institute of Information and Communication Technology. And I also happen to be the founder and currently the CEO of Rax Labs. So I would love to know a little bit about all of you. What's your research area? From which institute or university or organization you are doing your research from? And just say hi and hello to each other. Let me see. I can see Awal. I don't know whether that's Ali would be the name, I guess, right, Ali? That's probably your first name. Balsam. Hello, Balsam. Nice to see you. And let me get on to my YouTube friends. So we are going to start this session soon. So tonight, the discussion topic is hello, Meltem. Nice to see you. Hi, Balsam. What's your research topic? What research topic you are working on? So tonight, what we are going to do is we are going to discuss a little bit about how we should be or should not be interpreting our results, our findings, and how we should be, when we are trying to use those results, how to use them to support our claims. And when we are trying to support our claims or our hypothesis or the approach that we are taking, what are the things that they should be taking into consideration in order to make sure that our case is really strong, in order to make sure that our case is very convincing, right? So optometry, great to see you. And from which university you are from, or which institute for that matter. Hi, Ali. Okay, so hi. Oh, hi, Melton. You're from Sheffield. Are you from Sheffield University? Nursing. Great. What's your topic in nursing? What specific topic you're working on? Balsam is from. Oh, you're from King Saud University. That's a very good university in Riyadh, right? And you're working in optometry. Would love to know what Ali is working on. Okay, you are focusing on ethnographic study with children who are obese. Okay, I see. That's really cool. And let me see who else. I can see Anil Khan. Is that how I should be pronouncing your name? Anil Khan? Hi, Anil Khan. Oh, okay, Anil John. Okay, all right. Sorry about that. Hi, Anil. What's your research interest? Would love to know about that, and which university or which institute you're from. It's so nice to see and meet people, researchers from all over the world having different research interests, different research, specific research problem. Get to know about these problems also. You know, many times what happens is I don't even get to know about what are all the interesting research problems that people are working on, really. You're from Izmir Institute, okay, in Turkey. Okay, I guess so. Yeah, it's a good university. You're working on biosensors. Any particular specific applied where the application is about? I mean, biosensors for what? I see Ali. Ali is quiet. Ali is the shy guy, I guess. Let me see if I have my friends on YouTube. Hi everyone. Hi everyone on YouTube. I can see some people joining in. Just say hi and hello. Would love to know who you are. What's your name? Which research interest you have? Which university you're from? And by the way, for those people who are yet to know that we actually have a really nice community growing up on Discord, where seniors can join in and help the juniors in figuring out how to do research in general, and also specifically if to the specific research, broader research area in which you are working on, and the juniors can join and get a lot of suggestions of possibly what not to do more than what to do in that forum. So I'm going to share the forum link over here, and you can then sort of join over there. It's a really nice place where people from all parts of the world are coming in and joining. And let me see if I can share the link. Okay. Okay, that's the link. Hi Ali. Finally, Ali says hi. Hi Ali. What are you doing? Which interests? Which research interest? What kind of research interest do you have? Okay, so Anil is working on biofilms. Okay, I see. All right, that's interesting. Microfluidic devices for DNA sensing. Wow, wow, that's super cool. That's like the next gen thing, isn't it? Hi, Ali. You're working on privacy policy. That's really nice, and so it's more cryptographic sort of thing that you're doing, and it's more like at the policy level you're working. You're working more at the mathematical or computer science aspect of it, or more at the policy designing aspect of it. Great, great, great. And you're from University Science Malaysia. Okay, I see. I see. So right now it's 8 p.m. and we will keep chatting. Keep chatting with each other. It's not just about chatting with me. The entire point is so that you can keep chatting with each other and keep getting to know each other. And who knows, you might fork up some sort of a tie-up or a collaboration or something. And that's one of the reasons why we have created Discord. I've given you the link over here. So just join there and contribute to the club. Yeah, it's a community. We have created a community, Malcolm, over there on Discord, and all sorts of people are putting questions, and people are answering to those questions. We answer those questions. We give out a lot of useful materials. That includes video lectures or other kind of materials, so that we keep collecting, and also other kind of software that you can use, all different types of software that you can use. So we keep letting you know. And if you have very, very specific questions in terms of research or how to do research or something like that, we try to help as much as possible over there. So that's kind of the community that we are trying to build over there. So that is what it is about. So let's start it now, I guess, and then we will let people keep coming in. Okay. All right. So let me share my screen for tonight's discussion, as you all know, is about interpretation of the findings that you would be getting when you are done with your experiments. And that experiment can be, I'm broadly talking, when I'm talking about experiment, I'm including both qualitative kind of experiment, which would include surveys, questionnaires, focus group studies, clinical trials, right, randomized studies, right. So all those sort of things, as well as more quantitative studies. So I am including all of that, right. So let me just share my screen and let's get to the point. I hope my screen is visible. So let me just check whether my screen is visible, or somebody can just ping me saying that, well, my screen is visible or not. Okay, great. All right, so this is the third episode of getting to the results. If you're curious about what happened in the first two episodes, then just to give you a brief idea, the first episode was all about designing an experiment, how to design an experiment. The second episode was more about the experimental methodologies, and we primarily talked about all the different types of biases that can creep into your research or your experiment method, and how to make sure that you don't get into those biases and all the different sources of those biases. So we discussed that out, which means when you are conducting the experiment, what are the things that you need to be careful about. Tonight, it is all about interpreting your experiments, or rather the data, interpreting the findings of your experiments, rather, right? So just to give you the context, if you are curious about what RAX is, so RAX is essentially a next generation literature analysis and comprehension tool. You can also call it like a AI powered literature survey tool, which helps you to very quickly understand a paper, dissect a paper from all different multiple dimensions, to compare and contrast papers properly, and very quickly to compare and contrast papers. So Rax shows out all the different comparisons, all the different ways in which you can actually figure out what are the research gaps and where are the opportunities very, very quickly, and also zoom into specific aspects of the paper and then try to explore more about that aspect of the paper itself. So just go and play with it, you will get an idea, right? So again, this is the hypothesis, so to say, that, and I would say it's a fact rather than a hypothesis, that research career is about results, because you see that your career depends upon results that you produce, or the findings that you will actually have. If you don't have proper finding, you won't be able to establish your whatever claim that you are going to make or you want to make. And if you're not able to establish your claim properly, strongly, people are not going to bother about you. So your research career is essentially, if you look at it carefully, it's just as good as saying that you have great results, you have a great research career. Now, now the entire point of all this particular series and this particular episode as well is that you don't get into the situation that this cartoon depicts, the cartoon from PhD Comics, that it depicts that, it should never happen that you actually, you keep on coming back to your professor or your supervisor or and you're not able to produce the right kind of results and it's not going anywhere, right? So just to give you an outline of what we are going to focus on tonight. So if you look at it, if you look at the broader aspect of what research is, no matter what kind of research you are doing, whether you are into humanities or social sciences, or whether you are into biosciences or biomedical sciences or computational sciences, or any kind of thing, natural sciences or law, whatever that is, you or everyone, we all have to start with a research question. So this is the crux. We all start with a research question, and then what we do, we actually have a corresponding hypothesis, which means we try to address this research question, right? So this is a research question that we have to address it. And we address the research question by stating, by claiming something. And that's kind of the research claim. And we say that this is the statement that I am making. And since this statement is essentially what the solution, or what essentially how I'm going to address this question. And then what you do, you apply certain methods to finally arrive to this claim. So you are then going to tell that, okay, I'm going to take some approach, I'm going to make some methods, I'm going to do some step by step process, take a process, and then I'm going to address this question, and then finally I will be able to establish my claim. So that's like the bigger goal, and that's true for every research essentially. But if you zoom into it a little bit, and this is the current discussion, tonight's discussion, that what we are going to do is we are going to focus on the findings or the results. So if you look at research method, any kind of research method, when you go through the method, you will get to a certain kind of findings or results, right? And then what do you do with the findings? You then start analyzing it. Of course, observation is a part of analyzation. So you observe the findings, and then you start analyzing the findings, right? Once you analyze the findings, then you use that analysis and you support your claim. You validate your claim, right? And that's the process, right? So today we are going to talk about this part. To go a little bit deeper into that, what we mean by that is that you start with some observations, you get some results, you observe them and note them down, structure them properly, and then after structuring them properly, noting them down properly in whatever noting way it might be required. It can be visualization, it can be tabular format, it can be certain kind of graphs, it can be certain kind of figures, it can be it can be many different ways in which you might want to observe something, right? And or it can be certain kind of lab, if you are doing wet lab, then certain kind of experiments when you run, and you get some observations which you might be putting down nicely in a structured way in some sort of ELNs or electronic lab notebooks. You might want to do that as well, right? And then what do you do after that? This is the part which is interpretation. You try to interpret your observation, your results, in whatever format you have observed it and kept it and recorded it. Now you're going to go deeper down into that record, into that data, into the observation, and you want to interpret it, right? Once you get certain interpretations of that result, you get some insight into it, right? You get to see some pattern out of it. And then when you get to see some pattern out of it, you try to use that pattern to support your original research claim, right? And either you do that, or you see that the interpretation is coming out to be such that you're not able to support the original claim that you thought would be reality. Let's put it that way. And then what do? You then try to modify the original claim, right? And in a way such that what you are actually seeing, the reality aligns with the claim, right? So that's what you would do. So now let's talk about the first part, which is the observations, right? So when you look into an observation, you see that there are three goals, three types of observation, or three different objectives rather of observation. I wouldn't say type, but I would say three different objectives or aims of observation, any kind of observation. The first aim or the first goal is to make sure that your approach or your method or your line of arguments, if you're making some line of arguments, or whatever deductive mechanism you are using to approach to come to establish a claim, whether that approach is showing the expected behavior. Which means you had an expectation. You thought that if I take this approach, if I take this direction, if I take this route, if I follow step number 1, step number 2, step number 3, and step number 4, then I will ultimately I will be able to see this kind of results. I will be able to see this sort of findings, roughly. So what you have to do now, once you actually get the results and actually get the findings, you now have to figure out whether that is really true, whether the actual finding is close enough to your expected finding. So you have an expected finding, you had an expected finding, and then when you got the results, you're trying to figure out how close that is with the actual finding, right? So now, and it's kind of an empirical way. It's actually an empirical way of testing the approach, testing your approach. So that's what you're doing right now. And then the question that you should ask yourself is, can you explain the observations with respect to your approach? So let's say you have an approach, you have a method, and you're trying to see whether the observations that you saw, whether you can explain the observations with respect to the approach that you took. Which means that if you, and this is very important to understand, if you are able to explain the observations, explaining the observations means what? Simple. It means, why did the observations came the way it came? Why the causality, sort of, like why are you even seeing this observation? And if you can explain that through the process of your approach, then it is consistent with your approach. But if you are able to explain, let's say that you are able to explain that, but that explanation is not really going with the approach that you took, then that's problematic, because the approach is not really going to give a logical conclusion to the observation that you saw, right? So there is somewhere, either there can be biases, and to understand biases, you can look into my very detailed, we did a very detailed discussion on the biases in the second episode. So either there could be some biases during your approach when you took that approach, and that's why it's inexplicable, in the sense that with respect to this approach, you are not able to explain the observations, why these observations are coming out. Or maybe it can be from a computer science point of view, it can be some bugs, or not. These days, a lot of people are using computational methods, and writing codes. So it can be some bugs in the codes also, and that's why you are getting certain observations. And that's why it doesn't make sense in the sense of, what you were expecting versus what you are seeing. Or it can be very well possible that, well, you might have to look back into your approach, right? And when you are thinking about looking back into your approach, is usually the situation would be that the observation that you're getting is you are not liking it, in the sense that it's not good result, or it's not optimal result, or it's not the result that you can actually boast about. It's not the kind of results that you can actually go out into the research community and talk about, right? So you then know that, well, you didn't get a really good result or really good observation, and you now have to think about a different approach, right? So, and one important thing is, at this stage, I would say, is that it's not just you thinking about why certain things happen certain way, but you should discuss at this point with your supervisor, with your lab mates, with other people, maybe collaborators, or even with people in your community who are close enough to you. Go and discuss, whether uh, whether your explanations or what you think that, maybe that, a lot of times it might happen that I think that I can explain the observation, but you should talk about that explanation. You should not just keep it to yourself and think that, okay, I got the explanation. So go and talk about that explanation with other people to see whether that explanation really is really supporting the approach or not, right? So that's pretty much about goal number one. Whenever we talk about observations, goal number two is that the second goal of any kind of observation is to figure out whether you can see certain new insights are coming when you're looking deep into the results and you're seeing some new patterns coming out of that result, new patterns coming out of that those findings. And then you might conclude certain very new things about it, right? So, and one aspect, which we call as comparative study. And by comparative study is that, how can you know that something is new? You can only know that something is new when you compare it with existing things, isn't it so? I mean, otherwise, how can I know that something is new, right? So how do your results or your findings compare with the findings of previous approaches, right? And by comparison, I already talked about it before as well, that there are essentially three types of comparison. Either you're augmenting a known result, which means you are extending, you're giving an extension or a derivation or a derivative or a corollary or whatever that is to a known result, which means somebody published some result, really good result, and what you did, you added onto it, right? And that way it is a new result. Or it can be new in the sense of you are contradicting. Your results are contradicting with a known result, right? And in that way, you can come up with something new, right? Or it can be improving a known result. And by improving a known result, it happens a lot in engineering and in computer science, where the entire point is that there is a solution which works to some extent, and you now came up with a new technology or a new solution or a new algorithm that is better than the previous one. So in that way, it is new, right? So your results. So if you have to go after goal number two, then you have to make a comparative analysis. And when you have to do comparative analysis, you again have to go back to all the papers that you've already read before in your literature survey, and all the papers that you're currently reading, and all the new papers that are coming up, recent times in all the new publications, because you have to make sure that you're up to date when you're doing this comparison. This is extremely important. Otherwise, what happens at the end of the day, you will write a paper after this, right? That the final step is to write a paper, which will be the topic of the next episode. But if you're not, the paper will not hold anywhere, any strength or any ground, if you are not able to compare your result with the right kind of results, right? And you wouldn't be able to publish it in a very good place. It will be rejected. Then the final goal, and that is the ultimate goal, and that's that you had a research question. We started out with a research question. So you have a research question, and every research question will have an associated hypothesis, right? And the hypothesis can be multiple different types of hypotheses. So whenever you have a question and you think that this is the answer to the question, right? So whenever you have a question, you don't have a blank mind about it. You have a question and you think that this might be the answer. Now that That answer may be wrong, right or wrong, that is a different thing. That is where the experimentations and your observations comes to the picture, right? But you have certain kind of a hypothesis that this will be the answer, right? And or this will be, or if it is a improvement kind of a thing, then you already know that I can get to a better result, right? Otherwise, why would you even bother to pick up that research question? I mean, if you are not certain that if you follow certain ways, if you don't have that intuition that if you follow certain direction, then you will actually get a much better result, a much better finding or results, right? So that is sort of like the associated hypothesis. And what you're trying to do is, through this observation, is the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is goal number 3, which is to make sure that you are able to use that result to adequately support your hypothesis. And this adequately is very important. And this is where, you know, all sorts of different techniques of whether you are using the right kind of parameters, whether you are using the right kind of controlled environment, whether you are using the right kind of observation variables, observable variables, whether those variables are the right kind of variables that you're trying to observe, whether you're using the right kind of measure to observe that, right? So these are the kind of things I discussed in episode number 1 and episode number 2 of this series. You can go back later on and watch those videos. I would highly recommend you to watch those videos. So that's the thing, you know, that you have to make sure that you adequately support the hypothesis. So far as the observations are concerned, these are the 3 goals. And whenever you're observing something for each one of these 3 goals, and not just for the sake of observation and just reporting the observation. No, that's not the point. Not just for the sake of summarizing whatever you observe. No, that's not the point. So always remember, you know, that's not the observation is not just to be noted down and reported and made a document of it and then make a summary of it. No, that's not the point actually. Right. So any questions so far? Let me see if I can get some questions. Hi, Vidya. Great to see you. Any questions so far, guys? So, good questions will be rewarded. So, any questions? I have put a question actually. How many of you find difficulty in choosing what should be the right way to interpret your results? Any vote for that question and any answers that people would like to give? Oh, okay. So the starting was right in, I don't know from where you missed me, but it's about, I just introduced how why interpretation is important and what is the context of interpretation, the general context of interpretation. Like you have observation, and then you interpret the observation, and then finally you support the claim. So these are the 3 stages. Once you get the results, after you get the results, right? So these are the 3 important things to be done. So that's kind of like, and I gave people a context to that. But since Vidya, you have already seen the previous episodes, you have not really missed anything much. Okay, so let's get back to business then. So at this point, since I told you that, this is another stage where you would be doing a good amount of literature recap or revisit of all those papers that you have already read because of goal 2. And you would now also be reading some new papers because of Go 2. And one way I can show you, if you think that that may be a good way for you, then what you can do is you can go to Rax. And for those people who are still to figure out what Rax is, the website is Raxter.io. And so I can just give you the link for those people who don't know what the web, and the sign up process is very simple. You can just sign up to a plain simple sign up, or you can just go use your email and sign it up. And then once you sign up, what happens is that so then you are in this space of projects. Okay, so you are in the space of projects, and these are all your research projects, as you can see. And many of these projects you are doing alone. Many of these projects you might want to do with your collaborators, your teammates, your supervisor, right? And some of these projects can be related to each other. Some of them can be very different than each other. Some of them you might have done way back, but then you might want to come back again, right? And I'm going to now look into one such projects. And this is one of my projects called Research Paper Summarizer, which I'm currently working on. And since Rax is a literature survey and literature analysis tool, what happens, we all start with the your reading list. So this is your reading room. This is your reading list, so to say. And you can add your papers from the folders where you're keeping your research papers or your reading list, or you can add the papers through PDF URL, or if you're used to using some reference manager, then you can add the reference file and import it from there. Or if you're more used to putting your reading list on Google Drive, then you can actually do that from Google Drive as well, right? So, and then once you have the reading list over here, then what you can do is, let's say this is one paper. Let's say this is one paper, and you can open the paper and it opens up the reading room. Okay, now how can you do, and you know, on the left hand, sorry, on the right hand side, Rax starts understanding what is the key aspects, the key themes of this paper, of this entire paper, reads the paper, and then tries to give you some more papers which are related to this paper, right? So that's what, that's the starting point. That's what Rax does. Now, after that, what you can do is something very interesting. Let's say that you are doing this recap. You are in goal number 2, right? And you are trying to figure out how your results are going to be similar or different, and so on, and how that compares with other people's results. So what you can do is imagine that you have already written a draft paper, right? So what you can do is, sorry about that, I lost it. Yeah. So what you can do is you can now create your draft paper, and imagine that this is your draft paper. Imagine this one is your draft paper, and you upload that paper in a particular project that you create. And then what you can do is imagine that this is a section. Yeah. And let's say that this is the experiment section, right? And in the experiment section, you want to know, let's say, whether there has been other papers which you have read long back, maybe 5 months back or 2 months back or 3 months back, and which are all the other papers that are already in your collection, which may have something which is very related to this technique which you have used as a part of your research method, right? So let's say this is the paragraph which talks about one aspect of the research method or the experiment method that you have used, right? And talks about a little bit about the findings, right? So what you can do is you can select this particular section which talks about the method and the corresponding finding or the results. And then as you select this section, this pops up, okay? Now when this pops up, there is a particular button, a feature called compare from your collection. You see over here, compare from collection. And then you click on it. And the moment you click on it, what Rax does is that it goes through all the papers across all your projects, not just this project, and figures out, are there papers whose where there are certain sections which are related, which are very much talking about pretty much talking about very related thing, right? So what happens is it goes into this 20, it actually found this 29 papers over here and 29 suggestions rather. And I can see that like one such paper, this is one paper that came out of this project, right? And I can see which part of the paper came out of this project, as you can see, which section of this paper. So it does not only tell you about the paper, but it also tells you about that particular section of the paper that is actually related to this paragraph, right? And you can also look into that section. And then if you think that this is something that is interesting, then you can connect it. And it gets connected like a clip, like a sticky note. This gets connected. These two papers gets connected, like bi-directionally backlinked sort of. This paper got connected with this section, or rather this section of the paper got connected with this section, like two different paragraphs got connected, sort of, so to say, with each other. And then you can add some remark and you can say that, well, this is like augmentation, which means that I am augmenting this in this way, and you can put some notes and saying that, well, I have augmented it in this way, right? Okay, so in a similar way, you can also choose other papers. And interestingly, you see that if there was another paper that you are working in collaboration with any other collaborator, then you can see that is also coming up, right? And you can also similarly connect it over there. Again, you can add like, well, okay, this is a contradiction actually, so you can put it like that. And what is actually the contradiction, you can put that remark over there, right? And in a similar way, you can keep going and you can say that, well, this is also an augmentation, right? And I told you, right, there are three different types of comparison. So this may be an augmentation and this may be an improvisation. This connection can be an improvisation. I'm just giving you some examples. Like, let's say this is an improvisation, and you sort of write what is the improvisation actually over here. So essentially you see that, and then later on, you can again come back to this section, this purple zone, and you can click on it, and you can see all your connections, as you can see over here, and it will also show you other suggestions if there are more suggestions for you as well, right? And similarly, you can go and you can look into the evaluation, and you can see these are the experiments, right? And you can do the same thing for other sections as well. So let's say that I do it for this section and I try to figure out whether there are other papers. Oh my God, yes, there are other papers that are related to this section as well. So you just have a quick look at it and figure out whether, to what extent these are similar or different, and so on and so forth, right? And again, you can connect them over here, right? So this is a really, really unique thing that we did in Rax. Rax understanding. You don't have to remember anything. You see, you don't have to remember the details of all. You can have now hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of paper in your collection, and Rax just simply gets them all out for you in terms of specific paragraphs. So, and you can then stitch it together, right? And then you can go to that particular paper and you can then look into that paper. And then what happens is that you can then go to that section of the paper and you can see that it gets connected over there as well, right? So this was the paper that you connected, and you can actually see where it got connected, right? Right. So this was the place where it got connected actually, right? So and you can actually look into it and see whether it's that paper or not. Yes, is that paper. You see that got connected into it. So this is sort of like the both way connection, sort of that starts building up in Rack. Essentially, kind of like you're threading one paper with the other paper for this purpose, for figuring out very quickly which are the stuffs that you need to compare. You need to put it into your paper when you are doing those comparisons, when you are finally making that comparison table and so on and so forth. What are the things that you should not be missing, which you have already read before, and to very quickly figure out. And not just that, new papers can also, come up, right? New things can come up. Like as an example, let's say that this is a particular section, let's say, which talks about some results, some findings that you made, right? And it's not just about the papers that you have already read, but it's also about those papers that are coming up, that are new, right? So what can happen is that you can actually select this section, and then there in the same place, in the same context menu, there is something else called explore related research articles, and then you click over there, right? And when you click over there, then what happens is all the other papers that may be related to this particular section in some way or the other, they will come up. As you can see, you can read the abstract and then you can make a decision whether you want to pin it or not. If you think that this is a paper that is actually, you really need to look into it in more details, then you can actually attach it, pin it, and after attaching it, you can then add to your reading list. So you can do both. So what happened? The paper got added to your reading list and the paper got pinned with this particular section. And this is the orange zone, and the orange zone means all those papers that you found out now. The purple zone is all those papers that you already found and it's already lying there in your collection, entire collection, right? So now you can actually go to this orange zone and you can actually find this paper. And later on, if you want to read the paper, you can just click and look into the place, and we will, for 7 out of 10 times, we try to make sure that we get you the PDF of the paper, wherever the paper is, in a legitimate way, in a legal way. But if your university is connected with us, then we can actually tie up with your university and make the PDF available for you. So that's the thing. That's a very interesting and very quick way. This is also another very unique thing that you can do in RACS to figure out whether there are also other new things that are coming up which you haven't yet read and which you need to do read in terms of the experiments and the data sets and the results and the findings in order to figure out whether this is happening or not, right? And whether there is a new thing that you are getting out of it or not, right? So any questions on this so far? Otherwise, we'll move to the next topic, which is the ways of interpretation, right? So any questions so far? Okay, great. I hope no questions so far. Okay. Now let's look into the interpretation. So there are two different ways in which you interpret your results. Of course, the goal is, as I have already mentioned, is to support the claim, which is your addressal, which means the way you are addressing, or the approach or the method that you are taking in terms of addressing your research question. So you have a research question, you have a way of addressing the research question, and that is the claim, essentially. So one kind of interpretation technique is qualitative in nature, and which actually happens a lot in those kind of research that use a lot of qualitative research methods, like surveys and questionnaires and focus groups, study groups, and so on, right? And and control study groups, randomized study groups, and so on, right? So participant observations, non-participant observations, all those sort of things. So over there, what happens is that the way to interpret, now you're collecting a lot of data. Let's say you're doing this massive amount of survey and focus group studies and whatever that is, and then what happens is you are getting a lot of these results from your samples, and hopefully that you are not bringing the biases in. And one important kind of bias over here is a selection bias, what we call as a selection bias. For those people who did not watch our episode number 2, I would again highly recommend you to watch that particular episode for learning about all these different types of biases and how to handle them. So I am assuming that you are aware of those biases and you are not bringing those biases in. And then under that assumption, what you should be doing is that you have to have some sort of a distribution-based visualization. That can be a pie chart, that can be histograms, bar graphs, that can be some sort of a graph. That can be also some bubble maps, heat maps. That can be multiple different types of visualizations, right? These days, if it is a multivariate data point, then you can do a high dimensional data visualization also, and so on and so forth, right? And these kind of data visualizations, the entire point of such visualizations is to understand correlations. And this is something very important, and why I highlighted it in red. Let me just put it into presentation mode. So why I highlighted this into red is that a lot of people get excited when they start seeing correlation in whatever sense they are looking into correlation. And usually you should be looking into correlation more from a statistical point of view, right? But then don't get too much of excited, when you are seeing correlation. And part of that I have already covered in details in terms of the biases that one might have in episode number 1, and also to a good extent in episode number 2 about the biases that one can have while one is measuring correlations, right? So by understanding the correlation, what I mean is understanding the type of the correlation. What does this correlation mean? What is the relationship between one variable and the other variable, or one data point and the other data point? It's not just good enough to see that they are correlating, which means if this goes up, this goes up, or if this goes down, this goes down, or if this occurs, this occurs. It's not just good enough to understand that. What is the real relationship between them? And one kind of relationship, only one kind of relationship is causality. Okay, we really need to understand this, that it's not just a dichotomy. There's causality and there's correlation, and there are multiple other kind of relations that one data point may have with another data point, right? And we need to make sure that we do understand the relationship very well, right? When we are actually looking into the data, why these two occur together, the why should come out quite clearly to us, because that will lead to the third step, which is concluding about the nature of the correlations, right? We have to make a conclusion. Otherwise, it's just a report, it's just an observation, and it doesn't have any interpretation. And that's not proper research. You really need to make sure that you are able to interpret it, right? You just don't summarize your report, right? So, and then finally, you have to use that, because you see that if you do this number 2 and if you do number 3, then you will be automatically able to support or modify it. This part is very important. The modifying part is very important, because a lot of times you will see that it's not really properly supporting the original hypothesis, but you have to modify the hypothesis actually to get an alignment with what you are seeing in terms of the correlations, right? And you need to make sure over here that you are choosing the right kind of variables when you're looking into trying to see how data points are correlating with each other, how they are grouping with each other, how two groups are related with each other. You have to make sure that you are looking into the right kind of variables and not the wrong kind of variables, because if you look at the non-important variables, then something might come together, two data points might come together. But the moment you look at it from the other point of view, which let's say that which are the right variables, then suddenly they may fall apart. They are no more correlated. So it might very well happen that make sure that that doesn't happen, and also make sure that you're using the right kind of statistical measure to measure this correlation. It's not just like a gut feeling or don't. It should not. Of course, you are not going to do that, but it should be on the basis of something which is concrete, right? So that's one thing. So this is what we call as quality. So whether you're collecting all the data from the survey or whatever that is, interviews or group studies or whatever that is, you need to make sure that you have some sort of an analysis which stands clearly out, which comes out, the pattern comes out very clearly, which helps you to support your original hypothesis, right? The other kind of interpretation is quantitative. And by quantitative interpretation, what we mean is that where you're actually running experiments on data sets, and data sets, there is no subjective understanding of somebody's response. So essentially, the participants are not really human beings primarily who will be responding to certain questions, or who will be showing certain behaviors because you did something with them, or you intervened in a particular way in a controlled environment. But this is pure data. And these sort of data that you got from some source, and then what you're doing with the data, you're trying to make sure that either the data is numerical in nature, or you have a numeric interpretation. You can give a numeric representation to that data without losing the semantics of the data, or the actual meaning of the data, right? But you can actually map the data to, so either it is by itself, as a raw data, it is numeric, or you can give a numeric interpretation to that data, right? Without bringing bias or without bringing noise into that interpretation, right? So then what you do is you actually bring certain kind of hardcore statistical modeling. You try to, and one kind of modeling can be hypothesis testing. And in terms of inferential statistics, what we know as inferential statistics. And then then what you do is that you can use all sorts of stuff like including p-value with certain with respect to certain kind of significance level, and you try to test a null hypothesis versus an alternative hypothesis, and so on and so forth. But I have to tell you, I've talked about this p-value issue before in episode number 2 as a bias. And one problem with the bias is the interpretation of p-value. I have seen that a lot of people, and this is a very rampant thing, a lot of people think that if the null hypothesis is rejected, that means that the null hypothesis is false. That's actually not true. All that it means, if you're rejecting a null hypothesis on the basis of, let's say, a p-value with respect to a certain kind of significance level, all that it means is that the data is not compatible with that hypothesis. But it doesn't mean that the hypothesis itself is false. Okay, it can mean multiple things. It can mean that the data collection itself had issues. It can mean that the sample itself has issues. It can mean that a different data, if you do run the experiment in a different environment, it can come out to be very different. So you have to make sure that you don't jump into this thing. So if all that you're saying is that this particular, with respect to this particular data set and this particular significance value level, this null hypothesis can be rejected, not falsified, and vice versa, right? So this is something that I really want to stress upon, that you really, whatever statistics you're using, you really need to have very thorough understanding of the statistics. What exactly was the statistics meant for? What exactly does the statistics do? And more importantly, what the statistics is not meant for and what the statistics is not going to tell you, right? So be very clear about that part. And this is one of the biggest issues, I would say, statistical biases in understanding and using statistics. So that happens a lot of times, actually. So, and then finally the claim, right? The three things: observation, interpretation, and claim. And there are like three types of supporting the claim, rather. So there are three types of support. One kind of support is very simple, where what happens is that you have a research question, and the research question is more like you can formulate the research question as a yes/no question. Like, does the sun rise in the east? I'm giving you a lame example. Does the sun rise in the east? Yes or no? Right? So you can and sometimes the research questions do not come out to be like a yes/no question, but you can always formulate it. You can twist it and reformulate it as a yes/no question, right? And then what happens, obviously, that your claim is either the yes part or the no part, which means you think that either it is yes or no, right? And then what do? You do all your observations and then your interpretations, and then finally, through your interpretations, you want to tell to the entire research community and the world that, look at, it's a yes, or look at, I told you that it's a yes and that's true, right? So that's the first kind of support. The second kind of support is where you try to say that the claim is possible or plausible or probably true or true to some certain extent with certain probability associated with it, right? So what you're saying is that you're taking not a strong stance over here, but all that you're saying is that, well, I did some qualitative analysis, or I did some quantitative analysis, or I did both. I did a mixed analysis. I did both qualitative and quantitative analysis, and I came up with these inferences. And that inferences clearly tell me that my claim can be true either under these circumstances, or my claim is true 80% of the time, let's say. So the likelihood function, essentially, the likelihood of how much my claim is true. So what is the probability that my claim is true? That is all that I'm after, right? Or what is the scope within which my claim is true? That is all that I'm after, right? So then the third kind of thing, which is you are trying to establish it. It's not a yes/no question, or it's not a question about to what extent the claim is true, or to what extent it is yes, or to what is the probability of it being a yes answer. But it's more about that there is a claim that needs to be established. Like if the research question is more about an observation, like in physics or in chemistry, the research question is all about observing something. Let's say that, I give you again a lame example. Let's say that you found Pluto, the planet Pluto, and that's your observation, and that's what you are claiming, essentially. So now, through all the steps that you took, why you think it's a planet, why you think it's a new thing and not some meteor or not some other kind of asteroids or nothing like that, and that needs to be, you collect all that evidences in terms of your findings, and then you finally establish your claim. And that also goes true for engineering kind of solutions or computer science kind of algorithms kind of solutions or techniques or technology, where you're trying to improve upon other people's work. And again, you're trying to establish that improvement, right, through your findings, right? So these are the three types of support that you can give to your claim, right? Don't overclaim. If you're making a claim and then you're not getting the support, you need to revise your claim. It's a lot better to revise your claim than to try to figure out, you know, by keeping the claim constant and then trying to figure out, hey, can I get another kind of sample, or can I like change the observational variables, you know, bring some other kind of variables or other kind of statistics, you know, or not using the right kind of statistics, using the wrong kind of statistics, and then trying to, you know, sort of like forcing the results towards the claim instead of trying to do the other way around, right? When you already know what reality is, right? So that's these are the three types of support, and this is the final goal that I want. I deeply wish that all of you get to this stage where, if for especially for people who are students, that you finally get to the stage of where you can actually do that. Yay! I finally got all my results approved by my professor or my supervisor, and I'm done, right? So let's see if I have some questions at this point. Okay, there is Dhruv. And Dhruv, will there be a feedback link and certificate for this webinar? Yes, we will give you a feedback link. Of course, this is something that we will do. To all the people who have registered, a feedback link will be there. And you can also put your feedback right now over here as well, in general. And we don't really have a certificate as such, Dhruv, in the sense that this is something that we do it like a community activity, and it's not something that is what I would say, like, you know, in the affiliation of a university or something. We do that, but when we are partnered with a university, and we do have university organized webinars, and we recently had a couple of them at different places. The most recent one, I think, was in Tata Institute of Social Sciences. And over there, it's a different situation, you know, and if the university thinks that they would like to provide certificates, then we do that in that situation, right? But it's a good idea. I don't know, you know, to what extent we will be able to formulate it really nicely, but probably it's a good idea to think about. Yeah. Any other question as such? So far, anything that you want to add on to, any comment that you have, or anything that you want to add on to it, you know? So if you have anything, then just let us know. Let me know, right? Vidya was quite quiet today. Yeah. Ali, do you have questions? Hi, Syed. Hi, Mudassir Syed. Mudassir, right? That's how I should be pronouncing. Where are you from? Melton, any questions? Otherwise, we can wrap up, I guess. Oh, you are digesting the information. Okay. We are going to, let me just give you we actually share these presentations. Let me just share it with you guys. So you can then come and, you know, look into it. Yeah, so this is the link, and please join Discord, because in Discord we keep sharing many such interesting and useful things, and other people also share, not just us. So, you know, if you have very useful things to share, you know, then we would love that. It would be really nice for the community. So do join over there. Okay, asking. Oh, okay, all right. I did not see it. Thank you, Vidya. I was wondering, like, where did it go? Okay, so how can easily locate gaps in previous research for developing our conceptual framework with respect to previous research, etc. Okay, so the first point, so the first step is always about, even before you figure out the gap, the first step is to figure out which are the places that you need to zoom into, which are the papers and which aspects of the paper you need to zoom into, where you might get to see a gap. So that's the first thing, right? And for that, we actually have created that feature called compare and contrast, which I just showed you, like how you can compare within your own collection to actually get to the point, first of all. Then the second thing that you should do is, if it is the research question, gaps can happen at 3 different levels. Gaps, you might find gaps in the research question itself. You might find gaps in the approach, and you might find gaps in the experimentation and the evaluation, right? So in the research question, I'm giving you a very, very brief thing. And Vidya, I suggest you to go and look into how to get new ideas from research papers, episode number 1 and 2 and 3 on YouTube. A lot more details, but I'm just zipping it into 2-3 lines. So for research gaps in research questions, what you need to do is you need to ask that, you need to look into the assumptions. And you need to figure out, are these assumptions true enough? To what extent they are true? Which are the situations where these assumptions will break? They will no longer be true. And that's your research gap. That's where you can start coming up with your own idea, because that's a new thing to explore, right? Or it can also be in terms of the scope of the research. Like there's a particular scope within everybody puts their research, and you can expand the scope, or you can twist the scope, and you can redefine the scope, and you can look at the same research problem, right? Or what you can do is you can figure out that, well, this research was not completely looked at. Which means there are certain aspects of the research question that people have not really addressed or identified. And those are the aspects of those components of the research question can be your starting point, which can be the new thing. So that's the gap. The second kind of gap is in the approach. And in the approach, the different gaps that you can find is in terms of the logical consistency of the entire flow in which the approach has been done. And if you see that there are some key points missing, there's some missing links within the logical consistency, then that is one kind of gap, that you can see that clearly one narrative and the second argument and the third argument, clearly the steps can be improved. And every step has its own set of goals or milestones, right? Like whenever you take one step and you achieve something, you get to some findings or results, and then you take the next step and you get to some results. And if you look carefully into those results, and you may find that these results are not good enough, you can even improve the first step, or you can even improve the third step, or you can even improve the fifth step. And that is actually a research opportunity for you, where you're looking at the steps of the approach and you're trying to focus on each one of the steps and figuring out whether you can either improve the step to get to a better result, or whether there is a missing gap in terms of, so it doesn't make sense to go from step number 1 to step number 2. There should have been a step number 3, because otherwise it doesn't make sense, let's say, right? Or it can be at the evaluation section. And the evaluation is, you can either find certain biases in the evaluation. The setup was not done properly. You can clearly see there was some bias in the experiment design, or the parameters were not taken properly, or there are other ways of looking into the same experiment, other ways of other observable variables that should have been taken care of, or other parameters that should have been taken care of, or or the measures that were used to observe something. Those measures are not really the right measures to observe that thing, and we need a different kind of a measure to observe that thing. And by measure, it can be mathematical measure, it can be statistical measure, it can be even an instrument, or whatever that is. And you feel like, well, that's not really the right way to observe it, to measure it, right? So there can be an opportunity over there, right? So these are the three different areas in which you can actually get to pick up the gaps or the opportunities. It's not always the gap. A lot of times you're also picking up opportunities, right? So gaps are like the holes but opportunities are more like the golden nuggets that you get to see in other people's work, and you pick up those nuggets and then you use it and reuse it in your own way to achieve or to support your claim, or to achieve your to address your research question, right? So always remember, this is not about always figuring out where the hole is in other people's work, but it's also to figuring out where the golden nuggets are in other people's work, and how can I actually take those nuggets in terms of the research question, or in terms of the approach, or in terms of the experimentation, and do something about it, do something interesting and new, right? I hope I was able to answer that question. Wait, any more question? Otherwise, we are going to wrap up. All right, so hope it was helpful for everyone, and also hope it would be helpful for those people who will watch this video later on. And thanks a lot for being with us. Thanks a lot. Was lovely to meet Milton. Was lovely to meet Drew and Ali. And there was, I guess, Balsam. I don't know whether Balsam is still there with us. Anil. So catch up with us. Bring your friends in the next sessions, and do join Discord and help the entire community, right? So stay very, very safe and very, very healthy, and take very good care of yourself and your family. Bye-bye. Have a very good night. Bye.